Tonight, I will be sharing 5 stories from the Reddit forum r/NoSleep, from stories involving the dark, cryptids, ghosts, and more. A huge thank you to all of tonight's writers for allowing me to share their stories. Without them, this video wouldn't have been possible. Remember to send in your story if you'd like to have it featured. You can either submit it at my subreddit, r/slumberreads, or my email you can find in the description. Be sure to drop a like if you enjoy. Subscribing if you're new is also very much appreciated. Enjoy the video. And as always, I hope you all have a great night. When I was 13, I lived in an old town. It was a kind of town that would have yearly yard sales for every house. The one that you knew pretty much everyone, and most of them were older folks in the neighborhood. Do you know how every single town, no matter what kind of town they are, has a little secret? Well, mine has a much darker one. When I first moved there with my family, my mom and dad, we were told a small story after just moving in. Our neighbor told us of a dark figure that would come out at night, and it would come to those that went near the mine. We thought it was all fun and games, until we saw the look in his eyes, the one of complete fear. Naturally, being a smart family, we listened to the neighbor. Now fast forward to a few years later. I'm now 16 and a junior in high school. I have a little brother who's already 2 years old. I was invited to a house party after school. I knew it was going to be a lot of stupid people, but I was a teen. Most people know that teens don't make the best decisions. Anyhow, I went to the party after school telling my family that it was a study group. Things got heated extremely fast. People were drinking constantly. I was watching people take down full cans of beer in a few seconds. I was one of the few that didn't have anything to drink. I was pretty much there just to make sure nothing went wrong. After a while, people started leaving until it was only a few people left. The people that were left started a game of truth or dare. I was still there because my friend was there, and I was worried about her. Eventually, things got escalated from kiss someone to more dirty things and more adult-like. I stayed out of this. But then I heard a dare go off to one of the girls that stood out from the rest of them. I dare you to go to the mine. I was surprised that this had to come up. Almost everyone knows in this town that you don't go there. Though, we don't have any proof to support the fact that the rumors are true. People were more scared of the fact that it could be true than the fact that it could be false. The girl stupidly accepted it, and then went to get in the car. And since I was the only one over there that was sober, I was forced to drive. I was also worried that my reputation at school would be drove down to the person that was too scared to go to the mine. I was a teen. What did you expect? We got there in less than 10 minutes. It wasn't too far from town. When we got there, the mine was dark and there was hardly any tools left over time from people and homeless people grabbing them. But there were still a couple lying around. After we got out, the girl said she won the dare. But to the guy, it wasn't enough. He said for her to win the dare, she had to go inside of it. I immediately protested this idea, but he turned around and told me to shut up. This guy was drunk and obviously not thinking straight. I told everyone to get in the car, I'm driving you all home. This is a dumb dare, and they shouldn't go any farther. A few listened, but 2 stayed behind, the girl and the other guy. They laughed at us, calling us sissies, as they turned around and walked into the mine. As soon as they walked in, I had a bad feeling. The darkness around them somehow closed them off from the headlights as soon as they walked in. I didn't know how it happened, but immediately after they walked in, I heard screams. You know how they say some screams have enjoyment and others have terror? This was another level of terror. This was screams of absolute, like staring into death's eyes. After hearing the screams, the other side is telling me to drive. I couldn't leave them behind. I just couldn't do it. I grabbed my flashlight and run in after them. I could instantly tell that something was wrong with the mine. It was too dark. The moonlight wouldn't come in. It was too quiet. There was nothing going on inside, even though I knew 2 people were in there. I walked in, putting my flashlight to the walls and the ground. Even though it didn't go far, I could see a bit ahead of me. After walking in for what seemed like a minute, I turned around and couldn't see outside. I thought I didn't go that far, but I guess I did. Turned around, and I immediately saw something red, like liquid, dripping from the ceiling. I stopped and just stared as I saw a corpse hanging from the ceiling. I knew immediately it was one of them. They were wearing the same clothes they had on before. I gagged in complete terror as their mangled body just hung there. I turned and sprinted out as fast as I possibly could, and I couldn't see. My flashlight was dimming for some reason, and that's when I tripped. I could feel something crawling over me, not like rats with their tiny feet, more like one giant body itself. It was cold to the touch. I could feel it through my jacket. Whenever it touched me, I just felt fear and pain. I quickly got back up and ran, knowing that it was close behind me. When I finally got outside, I turned around. I saw something dragging itself back into the darkness. I saw it. It looked like a human hand sticking out of its back. When I turned around, I saw the truck and everyone was inside, just completely shocked as I walked out. We drove back to the house in complete silence and called the police. We told them what happened, and they sent a squad car over there to investigate. In the morning, when they finally sent someone inside with lights, they said they couldn't find a body, no blood. Ever since that night, I've been terrified of the dark. My wife thinks I'm weird for sleeping with a nightlight in the room, but she'll never understand how I felt when I had that thing on my back. I've since moved out of that little town. My town no longer has a dark secret to be shared with everyone, but I still remember the fact that the mind still stands to this day. I know what I saw that night, and I know whatever that thing was had killed 2 of my friends and had some help to dispose of the bodies. Someday, I'm gonna return, and I'm gonna go in there and face whatever my friends faced that night, and when I stare death in the eye, I'm going to laugh as he comes at me. Just wanted to get this out of the way right off the bat. I don't believe in ghosts, or souls, or poltergeists. Any of that afterlife hoo-ha. I'm agnostic, and really into empirical science. Not saying that to condescend anyone who does believe in those things. You do you. Just wanted to make it clear that I'm one of the biggest skeptics you can meet. Nonetheless, I do believe that weird stuff happens to people that appears otherwise inexplicable, and I've encountered several instances that many would call paranormal or ghostly encounters. One such occurrence permanently left a mark in my mind that still affects my mannerisms to this day, despite it happening 15 years ago. And that's the story I'm going to tell. This is 100% true. Couldn't make it up if I tried. I was 6 years old, and even back then, I would have told you that I didn't believe in ghosts, but that was more of a foolhardy attempt to sound mature and tough than a subscription to a particular set of scientific principles. In reality, ghosts, or the idea of ghosts, was the scariest thing besides death itself that I could conceptualize. Popular horror anthologies like Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark and Goosebumps spread around my grade school like a rash in those days, so I could never get away from my fellow first graders' conjectures about the dangerous world of evil spirits. Somewhere along the way, probably after hearing a specific rendition of Bloody Mary involving a staircase, I became extremely afraid of the stairwell leading up to the platform that cut about 6 feet worth of space between my room and my parents' room. At that age, my scared little self would haul it over those 6 feet at the speed of light every night so that I could sleep with my mom. I could never bring myself to look down the staircase in the dark, but it was impossible to avoid crossing paths with it. The bathroom was also on that same landing, perpendicular to my room, so I would have to encounter it to pee too. At some point, I must have gotten sick of being scared over a set of stairs, so I resolved one night to haul up my onesies and face my fears head on. I operated under the pretense, of course, that my fear of the staircase was based on nothing, and there was nothing about a dark set of steps to be afraid of. There's no such thing as ghosts. On this fateful night, I leveled with myself to not run across the landing. I told myself I would just walk across it, like a normal person, and nothing would get me. No Bloody Mary, no Candyman, nothing was coming up those stairs. I was so emboldened by this aphorism that I even decided that I would stop dead in my tracks and just drink in the darkness. So I stood there, in the middle of the landing, halfway in between the 2 bedrooms, to prove to myself that there's no need to hide when it's dark outside. For a couple seconds, everything was great. Just dandy. I heard nothing and saw no one. I drank in my triumph and courage. And then, sure as shit, a man laughs. Like, Listen, I don't know how to describe this to anyone whenever I tell this story. All I can tell you is, I was standing there on the landing at the top of the stairs. It was almost pitch black. My parents were fast asleep behind a closed door, and all the televisions in the house were off. It wasn't a distant or muffled laugh. It wasn't a, I think I heard it, but it was kind of whispery thing. Crystal clear as day, loud as hell, sounding like it was both in my ear and coming from down the stairs at the same time. I think I was scared so shitless I couldn't even really process where it was coming from. Specifically, it was a deep voice, and it sounded as nefarious as a maniacal laugh can be. Like whoever it was waited for the moment I felt proud of myself for withstanding the darkness, before cackling like a supervillain just to mess me up. Well, mess me up it did. I jetted across the landing to my parents' room, dove under their covers, and didn't speak of it until I entered my late teens. To give you an idea of how real this was to me, I, to this very day, cannot stand on that landing in the dark. If I'm staying at my parents' house and have to pee in the middle of the night, I run or leap over the landing just like I did as a little kid. I'm a 22-year-old grown-ass adult. I know, rationally, that I must have imagined it or dreamt it or something. I'm almost certain that my imagination was so fixated on the possibility of encountering something that it generated an auditory hallucination. This notion brings me little comfort, however, because it just makes me afraid of what my own imagination is capable of. Even with the clarity of hindsight, I can't chalk it up to a dream. I was wide awake. And I'll probably die with this totally ridiculous notion that if I dare to stand on that landing in the dark, I'll hear that man's laughter again. In some way, I'll never be completely comfortable at night in the house I grew up in. When I was a child, my friends and I used to love swimming. During the summer, every Friday, we would all go to my friend Harry's house and go to the village pool, which was just down the road. Harry's dad wasn't just a qualified lifeguard, but also a member of the local council, and of course, was in charge of the pool. Thanks to this, even though the pool was only open during a select few months, my friends and I could catch the last of the good weather during July. Some years, we were even lucky enough to use the pool right up until the middle of September. Me, Sam, Harry, and Jack were as close as young friends as we could possibly be. Our year group was made up of about 13, 14 people, so becoming friends with everyone was a guarantee. Yet we shared a much deeper bond. We did absolutely everything together, and unlike a lot of friend groups, where you may prefer some members over others, we all shared the same amount of admiration and respect for one another. It was like hanging out with the cool kids, and feeling like a leader at the same time, and it was an unmatched period of time in my life in terms of acceptance and true, unrivaled happiness. Until Harry was taken. I believe it was a Monday. We had a bank holiday, so we had an extra day to spend together, and of course, it was towards the end of July, right when the pool closes for the public. Sam and I cycled down to Harry's house, which took about 15 minutes. Harry and Jack were already standing outside, with their bags on their backs, and holding their towels in their hands. Sam hopped off his bike, and ran to go and greet them, while I offered to take both of our bikes into Harry's garage, where his dad currently was. "Hey Jacob, looking forward to swimming?" "Hi Mr. Davies. It should be really fun." Harry's dad was an incredibly kind man, seemingly always full of life and never angry. There was a certain childish passion that made him feel like an honorary member of the group, without ever overstaying his welcome. I left the bikes up against the wall and ran back to my friends. Harry and Sam were looking at something on Sam's phone, while Jack was sitting on the wall next to Harry's front gate. I jumped up and sat next to Jack on the wall. We were just launching into a conversation, presumably about some schoolyard gossip, when Harry's dad came out of the garage, walking down the road and beckoning to us to follow him. Jack and I jumped off the wall, and we walked as a group of 4, taking playful verbal jabs at one another. At the age of 12, we had just about developed the bravery to start using all of the 4-letter swear words, and Harry's dad couldn't have cared less. In fact, I often heard him sneak a laugh when one of us said something particularly crude, something that only someone new to swearing would think was funny, but that held a lot of charm. We got down to the park and spent about 10 minutes on the climbing frame while Harry's dad unlocked the metal gate leading to the pool and made sure that everything was safe. "I bet I'm the fastest out of all of us," Jack quipped. "We settled this last week. I beat you," Sam snapped back. "No, idiot. I mean in the pool. I can outswim all of you, hands down." Jack was a great friend and, as the strongest of all of us, always kept us out of harm's way if any older kids ever tried to pick on us. He never hurt anyone, but he knew that his physical presence was enough to make most think twice. His pride was unmatched, but he was always good-humored when playing the role of the bad loser, making terrible excuses as to why he lost, and laughing at himself along with the rest of us. Sam, by contrast, was the smallest and meekest of us all, but was lightning quick both physically and mentally. I've never met a faster thinker. I don't think I ever will. He had an unnatural way of making sure that we all avoided trouble, and could talk his way out of anything. "Come on, boys. We've only got a few good hours left." Harry's dad didn't need to tell us twice. We all made a mad dash towards the gate, with Sam making it to the toilet, which doubled as the changing room, faster than all of us. He let out a mocking laugh before slamming the door shut and bolting it. All three of us made it to the outside of the toilet, panting, short of breath, and boiling under the hot sun. As soon as Sam came out, Jack moved, filling the doorway, making sure that he was next in line. Sam ran past us, cannonballing into the pool, soaking both me and Harry. We shouted out in mock rage as Sam laughed before diving straight underwater. Harry's breathing was still rather ragged, so I got out my inhaler and gave it to him. He took a quick puff and thanked me. Harry was the only one of us that had asthma, but we all kept a spare inhaler just in case he was ever without his. We cared about each other like that. Jack came out, and I let Harry go in next, so he could get out of the sun and recover a little easier. Harry's dad looked a little concerned, but I gave him the thumbs up and he returned the gesture, mouthing the words, "Thank you," as Harry walked in. Jack made a beeline straight for Sam, letting out a roar as he dove into the pool. Sam had resurfaced and let out a squeal of childish delight before diving straight back under. I watched the abstract shapes of Jack and Sam fight underwater, and shivered with glee as I watched Sam struggle violently as Jack grabbed him by the shoulders, pulling him back up towards the top. Sam and Jack broke the surface of the water, both laughing violently, so much so they began coughing through their mirth. Harry came out of the toilet, giving me a high five before pencil diving into the water, sinking to the bottom before Sam and Jack could notice. I knew this technique, as Harry often liked to grab us underwater, with us unaware of his presence. It scared the crap out of us, and brought Harry an unlimited source of joy. I went into the changing room, being careful to untie my shoes, instead of just kicking them off, and got changed into my trunks. I put all of my clothes into my bag, and left my bag alongside the others, coming out of the toilet. I ran towards the pool, seeing Sam, Harry, and Jack lined up along the wall, preparing to swim the length of the pool as fast as possible. I hopped into the pool, lining up with the rest of them. Harry's dad sat in his lifeguard chair, had a steely look on his face, making us all giggle. "Champions, are you ready?" he bellowed. "Yes, sir," we roared back. "Ready, set, go." All four of us launched ourselves off the wall, making a mad dash towards the other end of the pool. I vividly remember putting every fiber of my being into that sprint, cutting through the water at a blistering pace. Meeting the wall, I somersaulted in the water, pushing myself off the wall once again, and felt pure exhilaration as I saw that both Harry and Sam had only covered half the difference. Jack, however, was hot on my heels. I concentrated my efforts, moving faster than I thought was physically possible. I arrived at the start, finishing my length, as Jack came crashing in after me. I stood up in the shallow water, taking a deep breath, before roaring in victory, as Jack screamed in defeat. I felt incredible. Jack pretended to sob in sheer woe. I laughed in his face, and he got up and playfully pushed me into the water. I rolled over onto my stomach and pulled myself along the floor until it became deep enough to swim again. Jack followed suit, and I swam towards Harry's dad, as both Harry and Sam stayed panting on the wall. Harry's dad helped me out of the pool, and raised my hand in the air in victory, as Jack stayed outraged, while Sam and Harry cheered for me between deep intakes of air. "Gentlemen, you're superior." Harry's dad exclaimed. Harry hopped out of the pool to fetch his inhaler, just in case, as I hopped back into the pool. Harry's dad went to the shed where the heater was kept, raising the temperature of the water slightly. From the shed, he brought out a bunch of inflatable floats and lilos. Sam and I got on top of a huge yellow float, and Jack took up the role of the sea monster. Jack dove under the water and swam underneath our float, pushing upward on the float to try and unseat me and Sam. We wobbled and shrieked as Jack roared. Even underwater, his incredible strength was a marvel. I looked over and saw Harry and his dad sitting together talking. They both looked rather sad, and I assumed that Harry's asthma was stopping him from coming back into the pool. I called Jack's name, and he resurfaced. I'm gonna go over and see if I can get Harry to come back. Alright, that's cool. Guess I'll just have to eat Sam alive. You can try, shithead, Sam yelled, with pure smugness on his voice. Without a word, Jack dove down and pushed himself off the bottom of the pool, breaking the surface of the water, and barreling Sam off the float into the water with a shriek of fear. I made my way over to the pool ladder and stepped out, making my way over to Harry and his dad. Harry's dad turned towards me, a somewhat melancholy smile on his face. Is everything okay, Mr. Davies? I asked. It's fine. It's just Harry's asthma. He just got a little frightened. I looked past Harry's dad to Harry, and he looked very cold. Hey, we can get back in the pool and you'll warm up, and I'll make sure I don't leave your side. So if you need your inhaler, I'll make sure you get it as soon as possible, I said. Harry looked somewhat convinced, but I could tell he was still full of trepidation. If we don't have you, we'll never kill the sea monster. He's quite fat, and I'd really like to stick his arse in a frame and hang it on the wall of the toilet. I smirked. Harry laughed, and I knew I had him now. He got up and gave his dad a hug. His dad laughed, his shirt wet, but he held Harry tightly. Harry let go and quickly spun, running towards the pool, diving into the water. He climbed onto the float with Sam, but before I could follow suit, Harry's dad grabbed my arm, and I turned to face him. Jacob, thank you. Harry has a hard time with his lungs, and I know how much you and the guys mean to him, he said earnestly. I smiled, shrugged my shoulders humbly, before jumping into the water, attacking Jack with my special sea monster slaying dagger. He fought viciously, but with the help of the brave men atop the float, we managed to kill the foul beast. Jack came back to the surface, whilst Harry and Sam dropped off the float, so that all four of us were treading water. We started playing superheroes under the water, darting from one side of the pool to the other, corkscrewing and somersaulting through the water. Eventually, Sam and Jack went to the shallow end of the pool, while myself and Harry moved towards the deeper end. Harry and I always played a game with the floor vent at the end of the pool. The floor vent, small and circular, no longer and wider than both feet put together, sucked water through. As such, it had a small pull, not nearly enough to keep one of us in place, but it was enough for us to feel a small rush of adrenaline, almost as if we were, in fact, trapped. When one of us was trapped, the other would have to swoop in and save them. Essentially, it was a game to see who was stronger and could force the other person to move. Harry and I played this game for about 10 minutes, laughing under the water and joking around, screaming, help me, before chortling at the warbled sound of our voices under the water. Eventually, I moved from the vent, over to the left side of the pool, at the middle point between deep and shallow. Harry was still over by the deep end of the pool, along the right side. We were both dipping under the water together, making rude signals at one another, laughing even harder this time. After some time, Harry turned towards the wall underneath the water and pretended to be typing on a keyboard, presumably as part of some sort of joke. At that moment, something changed. The vent always had a small stream of bubbles rising from it, all the way to the surface of the water. All of a sudden, they stopped. I watched the stream of bubbles die. The water looked too calm, and even while surrounded by the heated water, my blood ran ice cold. The vent started moving ever so slightly, almost as if a light vibration was running through it. It shook more and more violently as seconds that felt like hours passed. Harry was still engrossed in the setup of his joke, not noticing as the vent opened slightly as if someone were opening it from the inside. A long, thin red arm, glossy and perfect, snaked out of the vent, It had a cartoonish white glove on the end of the arm. At first, I didn't believe it was real, frozen in abject fear underneath the water. More and more of this arm came out of the vent, and an incredible, limp mass lay on the bottom of the floor. It still trailed into the vent, and I have no idea just how much of this thing there was. The white gloved fingers twitched as Harry turned, about to execute the punchline of his long-forgotten joke, before looking at the thing on the floor of the pool. Without warning, the gloved hand balled into a fist and immediately lunged for Harry's ankle. I heard the bones crunch underneath its vice grip, and Harry screamed under the water, yet little sound came out. The thing straightened out as Harry kept screaming, in too much pain to resist. Its entire mass had become straight, leading a diagonal line from Harry to the drain. In a split second, it retracted back into the vent, still holding on to Harry, and with another scream of abject terror, he went with it. His legs went through the vent opening, but he became trapped at the ribs, his torso too wide to move through the hole. The sound of cracking, splintering bone filled my ears, yet neither Sam or Jack had noticed, arguing with their heads above water. I heard Harry's ribs snap, his sternum giving out, and his muscles tear, as he shook violently in the vent. Blood started gushing from his mouth, like crimson clouds, and his eyes rolled violently into the back of his head. His body began jolting, moving slowly through the vent, like processed meat through a grinder. I watched as the life faded from Harry's eyes, and the water surrounding him became saturated with thick red blood. Harry was slowly swallowed by the vent, and as his torso went under, his limp arms went vertical as the vent consumed him. The last thing I saw of Harry were the tips of his fingers, and then he disappeared entirely. I broke the surface of the water, so stricken by fear that I said nothing. I did nothing. Harry's dad, unaware of his son's fate, sat by the toilet reading a book. Sam and Jack were still arguing, their words abstract and overwhelming. Left with no other choice, I dipped under the water again. I closed my eyes on the way down, too scared to open my eyes again. When I did, the blood in the water was slowly rising to the surface. The vent grumbled, it appeared. With a sound like sandpaper rubbing against itself, the white glove appeared again, this time not followed by the red arm. The white fingers were stretched, elongated beyond any reason, and I dared not move, for fear that I was next. I could feel my lungs burning like white-hot fire, begging for me to take a breath, but it was like being hypnotized. The fingers stalked the bottom of the pool and came across the vent cover, moving at a breakneck pace. The fingers retracted, slamming the vent cover back over top of the hole. I broke the water with a gasp, so loud that everyone, Sam, Jack, and Harry's dad, shot around to look at me. My lungs were screaming, my body demanding air in spades. I was forced to take shallow breaths as I bawled like a child into the air. Harry's dad immediately jumped into the pool and moved towards me, calming me down and asking what was wrong. I fell into his arms, weeping and gasping, pointing into the water towards the area where Harry was taken. As if he hadn't noticed the absence of his son until this moment, Harry's dad moved with a frightening pace, wading through the shallow water and diving down towards the drain. For a few moments, I stood in shock, as did Sam and Jack, unaware of Harry's fate. Those few moments dragged more than I can possibly describe. I waited, knowing that whatever came next would not be anything short of horrific. Seeing a grown man, a father, someone you'd idolize as everything you wanted to be, broken and sobbing in front of you is a strange thing. Harry's dad was strong and kind, and more of a leader of our group than a separate person. When he broke the surface of the water, wailing in pure fear and sorrow, I think that's when I realized what had really happened. He flailed like a child who'd never been taught to swim, as if he was fighting the water. Nothing separated him from me anymore. He wasn't the idol he always was to us all. He'd grown so deeply. It almost scared me more than what happened to Harry. To take someone who was everything you wanted to be, and reducing him to primal, base sorrow was like having a hole punched straight through your chest. His cries pierced my eardrums, his voice radiating all around us. Even Jack, who was not one to become fearful, cowered from the sound. And Sam did the same, breaking into the same weeping and gasping as I did. Harry's dad fluctuated between screaming and crying until a family passing through the park came by, immediately rushing in to help us all out of the water. Harry's dad flailed and lashed out, not wanting to be taken away from what was left of his son. How they finally managed to remove him, or what they managed to salvage, I can't honestly say. The entire event past this point is a blur for me. All I know for certain is that the police arrived shortly after, and what happened to Harry was treated as a disappearance. Nobody was going to believe the kid who testified to seeing the endless red arm take his friend through the vent of the swimming pool. The addition of the white glove didn't exactly help either. The cruelest part of the entire investigation was that they pretended to take me seriously, and I would go on to find out that, behind the scenes, having me sectioned was a source of constant friction between the police and my family. Despite my lack of detail due to the obvious trauma of the event, my mother always believed me. My father was more skeptical, but he never called me a liar and supported me when telling my version of events to the police. When I was old enough to do some searching myself, I found that Harry's death was listed as a disappearance, despite the copious blood in the water. After thoroughly investigating the pool and its filtration systems, they found nothing at all. In the following weeks, our school went nuts. When the year group has only 14 people, anything happening to anyone creates a huge ripple. Not only did Harry disappear, but the only lead was my witness of his violent death at the hands of that red monster that lives in the vent of the pool. I wish I could say that Harry was okay, that my friends and I reconnected as adults and went back to the pool where Harry had gone, that we went down into that vent and slew the monster that took our friend and crippled our childhood. I wish I could say that we returned Harry to his father, and the two were reunited, that we lived the rest of our lives as friends who once shared unimaginable trauma, and overcome the evils of this world and emerge victorious. But that's not true. How could 3 11-year-old boys ever shoulder trauma of that magnitude? Sam's family moved away 3 days after the memorial service. I checked his Facebook yesterday. He's married, 2 kids of his own, only 22, but his family always were the traditional sort. He looks, I don't know how to describe it, like a boy forcing himself to become a man. He doesn't smile all that much in the photos. Jack stayed, like me, but we didn't talk much after what happened. When we moved to secondary school, he fell in with a rough crowd. It started innocently enough. He and his friends picking on the lower years and gaining a mean reputation. He, in particular, got vicious. So much so his new friends were more like his hired help. As he got older, it got worse. Last I heard, he was out on parole, and his girlfriend has a pretty heavy restraining order against him. I have no desire to help him. I don't even know that I could. About a year after Harry disappeared, both his mother and father shot themselves. Still being a child, I didn't get to hear any details until I was old enough to seek them out for myself. I was told they died peacefully when it happened, and I resented my parents for a time when I found out they lied to me. Protecting a child who watched his friend be snatched and crushed by a creature no one else could confirm the existence of. From the truth of the situation, felt like they were treating me like a kid. Of course, I was a kid. I never once felt like it. They'd shot themselves, laid together on their bed. From what I could gather, Harry's father had pulled the trigger. The bullet went through her skull and into his. Even in his dying moments, he chose to help someone else first. He couldn't let her feel the pain of loss, even for a millisecond. I don't think I've ever cried as much as I did when I realized that, in between their 2 bodies, tens of photos of Harry. Of course, I couldn't find out exactly which photos, but I know it would have been the ones of all of us together. Sam's 9th birthday, which we had at Harry's house, where Jack got stuck up the tree for an hour and a half. Harry's role in the nativity performance as a blade of grass. Me in the staff room with Harry after we both got stung by multitudes of bees the year before we went to the pool for the last time. Harry and I laughing with puffy red eyes from crying. He didn't take any photos while we were crying. He didn't pull out the camera until he'd made us laugh. I got pretty extensive therapy, always carefully towing the line between indulging my fantastical recounting of events and making sure to instill the ridiculousness of my story in my subconscious. I made my way through the school system as something of a loner, but still managed to make some friends, even made a few close ones. They stuck to me through college and, now, university. We're a close-knit group, but I've never really told them what happened. They know the abstract, of course, but not the whole thing. I talk to my mom about it a lot, minus the worst bits. She keeps telling me to talk to my friends about it. I know they'd believe me. They're wonderfully kind in that way. Maybe it's the pressures of being an adult, the strain it puts on certain relationships, and the way you interact with the people in your life. But I feel certain I'll never have what I had with Sam and Jack and Harry. They say the chances of the Big Bang working out exactly the way it did are so infinitely small, it's difficult to comprehend. I suppose that's how our friendship felt, like a miracle, a beautiful accident, chance. My parents helped me all the way through, Dad making sure, after some time, that I knew he believed what I had seen. I often think they must carry as much trauma as I do. The number of times they've heard me retell the story, the midnight wails of agonies I'm thrust wide awake, ripped from the familiar nightmare of the white glove, the hour-long panic attacks and the guilt of the knowledge I carry, that I will always carry. I'm training to be a marine biologist. I'm determined to be something, to make something of myself. In a sense, I have to live the life Harry won't, as well as my own. I'm doing it for Harry, and I'm doing it for Harry's dad, marine biologist. How ironic. I drove my truck for more than 40 years through the Rocky Mountains, delivering goods, making my money. Never had there been any troubles on my journeys, other than one or two breakdowns. But the story that I want to get off my chest at this moment, at the eve of my life, happened exactly as I am about to write it down, about 30 years ago, I swear. When my mind will soon find its final rest, I will at least not be able to hear the laughter of the people who read this. It is probably best to start from the very beginning. My life as a trucker might have been a lonely one from time to time, but I could always count on my colleagues. In silent moments, their voices over the radio gave me company in my isolated driver cab. Never would I have even remotely been able to dream up the unsettling situation I would experience. It was the summer of 1976. The month, however, I'm not sure about anymore. Maybe June. The journey had led me in my loyal truck over Olive Ridge, at the rims of the national park, and I gazed upon a crystal clear lake that sparkled down below the road, at the foot of a grassy hill. I still remember the cloudless sapphire sky, filling me with a feeling of comfort and carefreeness. The rhythmic sound of my truck's engine, that had been my sole constant companion for the past years, felt soothing, almost hypnotic. The leather seat that had adapted itself to the shape of my back gave me comfort and peace. Perhaps it gave me too much peace, for I noticed the man jumping onto the road in front of me almost too late. My reflexes allowed me to hit the brakes just in time, stopping the truck so that the old vehicle came to a screeching halt only a few steps away from the madman. I must have gotten out of the driver cab and started marching towards him, because nowadays, I only remember standing right in front of the man, ready to rip him a new one. When I stood there, I suddenly noticed something metallic. The lunatic had a gun. Angrily, I stopped all movements and took a closer look at the man. The guy had to be in his late 30s, had blonde, disheveled hair, a crazy look in his eyes, and torn, smelly clothes. "You, over there, stay still, exactly where you are," he demanded with a croaky voice. I made my peace with God, assuming the lunatic would shoot me, just to get a hold of my truck. Silently, I cursed myself for my stupidity. Why hadn't I stayed inside the truck, where it would have been a little safer? After all, everybody knew that people at the roadside never meant good news. "Calm down, dude." I must have tried to talk to the madman. You are not him. I thought..." The guy stuttered, perplexed. "What is your name? What do you want from me? If you want to kill me, just do it already." I tried to distract him. My name is Stanley, or Stan. I had a breakdown. Must have gone too fast, too hectic." He introduced himself, pointing behind his back with his free hand. Only now I noticed the old Jeep, having been run up against the many trees at the hillside, apparently by a confused Stan. That calmed me down a bit. Perhaps he was content with hitching a ride. "Where to?" I asked. Just forward. Stanley whispered and looked up and down the road, apparently searching for someone. Suddenly, he took down his weapon and started crying, shaking. I'm sorry. I am so sorry. I'm just not myself anymore. Please, take me with you. Please, I beg of you. I will give you all of my money, everything I have, everything you want. Please, I beg of you. If I were to stay." Confused, I took a closer look at the poor sob and started thinking about knocking him out cold. However, the strange, deep fear in Stanley's eyes made me hesitate. Additionally, some extra money was always a nice thing, especially in my line of work. "Are you on the run from the cops?" I wanted to know. Helping a wanted man was not my cup of tea, after all. The police? No. I would have been happy to meet a sheriff or a deputy around here. Perhaps they could have helped me. "No, don't worry. But I need to leave now," he shouted agitatedly, whilst flailing around the gun. Alright, get in, I hastily said. It would be easier to knock him out as an emergency measure, when he was sitting right next to me. This is why I let him climb onto the passenger side. With a grumpy mumble, I took my place behind the wheel again. "Please, I'm sorry, but my life is at stake here." Stanley started apologetically, after some minutes of unpleasant silence. I said. "What is your name?" He wanted to know, probably to calm the situation down a bit. "Bert," I said. "Well, Bert, I'm really sorry for my behavior, but I'm just terrified. He might get me." Stanley looked down at the ground, terrified. "He? Don't be so vague," I barked at him. "You would never believe me," Stanley said. "I've heard my fair share of crazy stuff. One of my colleagues tells me of his Bigfoot sightings at least once a week. Your story can't be more unbearable," I informed him, nodding my head towards the radio. "My tale is so crazy, even I wouldn't believe it, had I not just lived through it," Stanley admitted with a gulp. "Then hurry up, tell me," I said, admittedly getting a bit excited. I'd always liked a good story, and that way this poor guy at least wouldn't accidentally shoot me in the head. So be it. It all started yesterday. Everything. Yesterday, when my life was still normal and boring. I never would have guessed saying this one day, but I missed my bleak job as a desk worker, my little box. Well, it was around midday and I took a walk during my break time as I did every day. You know, I met many people that think of Salt Lake City skyline as something that closes you in, but for me, it has always been home, a place of safety. I've lived my whole life there, never having known anything else. "Poor guy," I remarked. "How could one ignore the call of this huge world, the call to adventure? I know myself, that I am just a man from the city, but my life was great, till yesterday. I walked on hurriedly through downtown, enjoying my break. Then it happened, a car crash, right next to me on the main street. An old van hit a school bus. Perhaps the driver had a stroke. Anyway, you might understand the shock I was in, the bang, the smoke, and I don't know why, but moments later the bus was ablaze. Horrible. All those people just..." Stanley stopped and looked into the void, trembling. "Everyone would be shocked. That still does not explain your behavior," I remarked, but on the inside, I couldn't wait for him to go on. No, of course not. If it had only been that, a shock would have been easier to cope with. Everything burning, ablaze, and then I spotted him. He was standing on the other side of the street and observed the gruesome happenings, completely unmoved by the screams and the smell of burning flesh and melting metal. This man, expressionless, he stood there, letting his gaze trail over the parts of the bus that were disappearing in flames. His dark gray pinstripe suit did not have a single mote of ash on it, and his dark shoes shimmered in the light of the midday sun, sinister and alien. His skin was pale and strangely coarse, his white hand gripping an old suitcase. That thing looked hideously out of place and out of time. I firstly could not get a look at his face due to the smoke, and today, I wish it had stayed that way. I can't describe this grimace. I just can't. My throat won't let the words out, and when I looked at the man, I suddenly felt his icy gaze resting on me from those eyes. I don't know why I fled, but I only came to my senses back at my office, back in my box. That's all. A face, a man. Perhaps he fought in a war and got disfigured. Surely you can't just... I tried to argue. Stanley, however, was quick to silence me. His face was not scarred. No, it was something different. It was... I just can't. And that was not the last encounter I had with that man. When I tried to distract myself with work, I didn't notice the passing of time. It had already started to get dark and my colleagues had gone home one after another. I stayed, trying to digest what I had witnessed. From one moment to the other, I started to get terribly sick. I felt his gaze resting on me again, and there he stood, directly in front of me, in the box next to mine. He started moving in my direction, slowly, steadily. "And then?" I asked, not believing what I heard. I did not feel well. Stanley apparently had lost his mind due to the accident, probably had gotten a concussion. Who knew what he was capable of doing at the moment? What do you think? I ran away, out of the building, onto the street down below, and he was standing there as well. How did he get there? I had to flee from this thing, away into safety. I took my car and drove away, just away. I had been going the whole night long, and again I saw him in the rearview mirror, driving a dark car, following me, chasing me. Every time I managed to shake him off, then I must have momentarily nodded off due to the exhaustion. Hit the tree, then you found me, and I had to take that chance. I had to go on. What if he had caught up to me? I looked at the shaking Stanley in disbelief. Seriously? Yeah, of course. Do you think I'm kidding around? Fortunately, I had the gun inside of my car. He whispered. I said nothing and looked at the tank meter. We would not get far with what we had left. On the next occasion, I steered my truck down a side road, towards one of the many service stations located in the mountains, where I finally parked next to a fuel pump. What the hell are you doing? Stanley stuttered, having turned even more pale. We cannot stop. He'll catch up to us. Yeah, well, if the tank is run dry in a few miles, we will be even more screwed. And stop with this man. You're under shock and stress. I barked at him and got out of the truck to refill the tank. Just as I was about to take the fueling hose, a horrid scream pierced the air, shaking me to the core. It was Stanley's voice. The poor lad had finally gone crazy, and with terror, I heard the roaring of my old truck's engine. Seconds afterwards, the vehicle was speeding past me, leaving me behind in a cloud of dust. Confused. The guy had screwed me over, telling tall tales. Or he had been madder than I had thought in the beginning. It didn't matter, for I had neither the promised money nor my truck. Cursed again. How could I have been so stupid? Why had I let him into my truck in the first place with this laughable story? Why did I... Moments later, I heard the sound of another car zooming past me, and my heart almost stopped. Behind the wheel of the black vehicle sat a being so horrendous that I could not even have dreamt it up out of my worst nightmare. A man, pale as a corpse, wearing a dark gray pinstripe suit and a big black top hat. His inhuman face burned itself into my memory, despite me having seen it only for a few moments. The eyes seemed big, lidless, and slit-shaped. His wide grinning mouth ran from one ear to the other. That smile looked like a part of hell itself. Staring, the creature sped past me in its car, not having noticed me, and I will forever thank the Lord that it didn't. It sped past me, after my truck, and disappeared into the distance. I am not sure whether I hallucinated all of the said encounter, whether the story of poor mad Stanley had shaken me more than I admit. However, I cannot believe that such a hellish smile has been produced by just my own imagination. My old truck was found on the same day. Someone had run it against a rock wall, yet the driver was never found, only the bullet holes, deeply piercing the passenger seat. I have lived on a reserve since birth. It was located near a big city in Ontario. My reserve was quite small, but it was still able to house a ton of people. I lived by a store that always smelled like bread. I've never been able to sit straight, so I go out of the house whenever I can. This was due to the fact that it was cramped, and I was helping with everything all the time. My favorite part of every day was when my friends would come to get me out of the house. I have been close with them ever since I remembered. My grandpa was a big part of my life and how I was taught everything. I was always happy when I saw him, even when I was in a bad mood, until one day, he just up and disappeared. This was hard to deal with because I didn't have anybody to comfort me. But I moved on. My reserve was like a fairy tale. Everyone knew everyone. With that being said, it got annoying sometimes when I went for a walk. Yes, it is all good and fun, except for one part of it. The abandoned village. The village near us scared me a whole bunch. It was creepy, run down, and unsettling. I heard stories of people disappearing without a trace. I felt uneasy whenever I played near it, because I heard something. Not just the houses settling, not the animals there. Voices of my grandpa. Sounded like he was calling me. He was trying to draw me there. My mother told me the stories of the skinwalker. She was a traditionally native woman, so she did believe in this stuff. I was always forced to wear a special necklace that would ward them off. It was made of a leather band, with a metal carving of a deer skull on a triangle template. It said something on the back. It was in Ojibwe. I didn't know much, but I didn't care. Thought it looked cool. I always shrugged it off as just a fairy tale though, except that night. I was around 14 when this happened. My best friend was the guy named Noah. I was also friends with some others named Terrell and Michael. We were your adventurous, outdoorsy kids. So we thought going to camp near the village was an amazing idea. I was packing some clothes because Noah told us we would be sleeping there for a couple days. This was during the summer, so it wasn't out of the ordinary to our parents. I was walking down my stairs when my mom walked into the door and told me to be extra careful. I told her, yeah, I will, while questioning myself if I would. I found myself at the table picking up some food for the camping trip. I was grabbing supplies for s'mores when I was interrupted by a knock on my door. I opened it, and surprise, surprise, it was my friends. I let them come in while I was getting my bag prepped. Noah called out to me, "Hey, when are we going?" I responded in an annoyed tone, "We go and we go." Before the sun went down, we were on our bikes pedaling down a trail that led into the forest. I was ahead to see if there was any potholes or rocks. It was a clean road. Michael was abruptly stopped when he hit a rock that wasn't there before. I must have missed it. While Noah and Terrell were helping Michael up, I was looking down the dim-lit trail. Thought I saw a bear, but it must have been my imagination. That was when I looked closer. A bear the size of a truck was stood on its hind legs, staring into my eyes. They were disturbingly human and dead. I pedaled back to my friends that I left down the trail. I made it to them breathing so heavily, it would be heard from a mile away. Noah asked me, "Hey Chuck, are you good?" I responded with only a nod. It was getting darker, so we continued on our path. I forgot about the bear and was about to warn them when a tree fell down in front of us. We were so startled we all jumped off our bikes. Michael inspected it and told us the roots must have been loose. We believed him because we were stupid 14-year-old kids and climbed over with our bikes. We finally reached the end of the trail and followed the more compact, hastily made trail for kids who wanted to drink in secret. Felt like miles when we were walking, but we continued forward. Noah interrupted our conversation saying he needed to go to the bathroom. While waiting for him, we played a good old game of Would You Rather. Halfway through Michael's, Noah came back looking sick. His eyes were dead, similar to the bear's. His skin was pale. He looked as if he was staring off miles into dead air. I felt uneasy when I saw him, but nobody else seemed to notice. Even though he looked different, he acted as usual. I was talking to Terrell about some problems at home. While we were making our way to the spot, Michael said, "Now, when we get there, I'm gonna make a good fire, and it's gonna be a blaze." Michael then revealed a small bong, along with some weed. Noah said, "Where did you get that?" Michael then told us, "I yoinked it from my brother. He won't notice it's gone." I was at the front of the trail when it opened up to a large clearing, and off behind some trees directly parallel was the village. I felt a chill run up my spine when I seen it. Michael shot me a look that said the same. I walked over to a spot with a fire pit and yelled, "This looks like a good spot." Terrell barreled over to me with his tent gear in his hand and told me, "Is Noah looking different?" I was shocked. I thought only I noticed it. Yeah, he makes me feel uncomfortable when I look at him. At the same time, I said that Noah was walking towards us and shot me a look that was so unsettling my stomach crumpled up. I then noticed that Michael was nowhere to be seen. I then asked Terrell, "Where's Michael?" Unsurprisingly, he didn't know either. It was pitch black when we set up the fire. It was blazing up the pit with its flames. I felt a wave of heat when it sparked up. I seen Michael over in the distance jogging towards us. I only noticed when he shot a loud shout at us. I was startled by it so much that my phone fell into the fire. I was both pissed and relieved, he told us. I dropped my phone back there, and I couldn't find it for an hour, but here it is. When he said that, he pulled it out of his pocket and shook it with a smile on his face. It wasn't even a minute when Michael pulled out his bong and started to smoke. I was a good kid, so I passed on it. So did Noah. Terrell and Michael were giggling over on their side of the fire, while me and Noah were talking about space. I felt uneasy when I looked off in the distance and seen a light inside the tree line. It was shaking so violently that I couldn't pinpoint the location. It was then cut off abruptly when I stood up. I thought it might just be a couple teenagers goofing around, so I went back to talking. I felt really tired, so I zipped open my yellow tent and went to bed. In the middle of the night, I was awake. I seen my tent's flap opening. I couldn't move in case it was someone trying to prank me, but it wasn't that at all. I took a peek to see what it was, and from the dim-lit fire, I made out a distorted, deformed face peering into my tent. Grotesquely large human teeth. It noticed I was awake and grinned at me. I felt something sharp touch my leg. I woke up to myself cutting my arm with a knife. I threw the knife to the side and called for my friends. Noah woke up and came into my tent with a light. He looked at me with cold, lifeless eyes. I felt that same feeling as before. He started to bandage my arm when Noah called out from his tent. I felt the most intense panic rush through my body. This Noah that was in front of me wasn't Noah. I ran out of my tent and was abruptly stopped by this imposter. My leg felt the most intense pain I have ever felt. I was so scared. I watched in horror as this thing's face deformed into darkness. I couldn't explain what I was seeing. Its mouth opened while its eyes rolled back into its head. It inched closer to my face. Its skin was tore up. Cuts and bruises covered its body. Skin as pale as a vampire. My body only then started moving. I was kicking and screaming at it. Terrell, Michael, and Noah came out of their tents to see a towering creature lumber closer to me. I felt a moment of adrenaline and screamed for my friends to run towards the village. He did as told. We sprinted as fast as our legs could bear. Michael tripped over a stump. I wanted to help him. I wish I did something heroic, but I kept running. We all hid in horror, listening to our friends scream until it was cut off, and all we heard was fast-moving footsteps. We all held our breath when it got closer and closer, until nothing. We felt a moment of tranquility. We all looked at each other with relief in our eyes, until we heard Michael call out our names. "Noah, where are you? Terrell, the thing left. It disappeared. Chucky, help me." I felt tears run down my cheek. I balled up and started crying. Terrell walked outside and said, "Where did it go?" No emotion for him to come back, but it was too late. The creature took form and picked him up. Its mouth opened to reveal those horrific teeth. The thing bit down on his head. We watched in horror as our friend's lifeless corpse fell to the ground, sprawled out in the grass, blood pouring from his head. I crawled up some stairs. Noah didn't follow. I heard the monster kick down doors of other houses. The pitch black blinded me. I could only hear the creature's deafening scream. It sounded human. Too human. I was huddled in a corner with my knife trembling in my hands. The door was then kicked in downstairs. I heard it crawl towards Noah, screaming and clacking its teeth. I heard him scream and cry for it to let him go. I started biting down on him. I heard his screams end. I felt hopeless. I wanted it to stop. I turned on my phone's light and seen my grandpa's hat on a chair. This monster took him. I started crying. I was hitting the wall. I wanted for it to kill me. I heard it crawl up the stairs. I was sitting on the chair with that hat in my hands. I was then face to face with the monster. Then I could tell, truly tell what it was. I was staring at a skinwalker. It picked me up, tears running down my face. I seen that it was wearing Michael's shirt, its mouth stained with my friend's. I wanted it to end. I closed my eyes and waited, but it didn't. I opened them and I was on the chair. I looked outside of a window and seen it scamper off into the distance. I looked down, and I was wearing my special necklace. I walked home alone that morning, my clothes dirty, my pant leg ripped up. I just told my mom it was a fox, but I knew that she knew. Reports of people missing were almost monthly. My friends' parents were trying desperately to find their boys, but I knew it was all for nothing. I moved away when I grew older. Got a job in a city. Never stayed long. I got a wife and kids now. But every time I feel like I lost it, I always seen it, stalking me, wondering what happened that night. Wherever I went, it followed.